Hello there and welcome back. Now, we're going to get started on our shot real quick, but let's go over setting up our project. So the very first thing we're going to want to do is bring in our footage. So we'll hit R to bring in our read node, and I actually want to set up a shortcut here so we can kind of navigate to this folder more easily. So what we can do is we'll hit this plus button here, and this will give us a couple different options. It'll give us the folder that the file explorer is currently in. That's what we want in this case. Then we can change the name. We're going to go with RBL for Rebelway. And then what we have here are the various contexts that you can open the file browser in Nuke. You can open it looking for images with a read node. You can open it looking for fonts. You can open it looking for geometry. That's what all of these different options are. And it's asking you, hey, when you open me from a given context, when do you want this shortcut to appear? Typically, what I do is I just check them all because I rarely don't have all of my elements in a singular place. So we'll check them all here and hit OK. And there we go. It just added our file path right here. So I have that selected. We'll go to our footage and let's bring in our footage 01. All right, there it is. We can view it. This is the same footage we saw earlier in the class. We'll just play this really quick. All right, so we have our footage in. Let's look into setting up our project. So to get into your project settings, you click in your node graph here and you hit S. All right, so it's brought open our project settings tab. So let's look at what's going on in here. So there are a lot of different things you can do here, but we're just going to look at a couple of the main options when you're first starting out your project. The first is your frame range. And as you can see, it has defaulted our frame range to the footage that we brought in first. So that's actually what we want. Nuke is smart enough to automatically set this up for us. Say we brought in a different piece of footage that went from frame 1 to 100. We've just reset up our viewer playback bar here. It now only goes from 1 to 100, but we want this to be 178. All right, that matches our footage. Excellent. Now the next thing you're going to want to set up is your frames per second. And you want to make sure that your frames per second is set to match your main footage. If you're not sure what it is, again, you can go into this handy metadata tab and just look through some of these values here, and you can see our input frame rate is at 24 frames per second. Now it can be kind of hard to see this information when the properties are hidden so far down. Now let's look at a different way to see node properties. So I'm just going to close this box right here and control double click. And now we have a floating panel with our read node settings. So now we can more easily see that our information is correct. The big project setting that Nuke doesn't automatically set for you is the format size. We want to make sure this format of our main footage is the format we're set to be working with. So let's click here, and Nuke has actually noticed that there's a new format brought into this project, and it's made it a preset for us right here. So we're just going to select this. And now our project format is set up to match our footage. This is important because any node you make is going to default to this format size. Let's close out of this and take a look at that really quick. Let's make another checkerboard. And let's pretend I can spell correctly. Excellent. This is 1920 by 816 because it's basing its size off of the root format. That goes for all of the nodes you create. If you look at any of them, they will by default have our root format. If we were to change that, just for sake of example, let's bring our project settings back up. You'll notice all of these snap to different format sizes. So this is very important to set. We'll get rid of all these nodes and go back here. All right, bring our project settings back to the top by hitting S. Now you can change color management. We'll get into this later when we start looking at ACEs, but for right now, the defaults are fine. So our project is now set up. That's really all we need to change is the frame range, make sure the frames per second is correct, and get our format selected, and we're ready to rock and roll. Now that we have our project set up, let's start analyzing our shot. This is a very important part of compositing that often gets overlooked. A lot of the time, you'll get footage and you'll just start compositing with the mindset that you'll figure it out along the way. This can cause a lot of headaches and struggles later, so it's always good to just sit there, even if it takes 5 minutes, and try to identify what exactly you need to do for a shot. Now let's take a look at what we're trying to do here. We're going to take 2 separate pieces of footage and stitch them together to make this final shot. We have a plate that doesn't have an actor walking through the bottom of frame, and we have a plate with that actor, but without a tilt. So let's take a look at the footage. Let's full screen our viewer by clicking in it, then hitting spacebar. Spacebar will full screen any context you're in, and we'll play it by hitting L for a shortcut. You can also play backwards by hitting J. So what exactly are we looking for here? Well, we're looking for steps we're going to have to take to complete this and potential roadblocks that we'll encounter along the way. Looking at this, immediately you can tell that we're going to have to track this in order to get our actor to stick to the bottom of the frame. Another big factor is going to be when we stitch our 2 plates together, where are the seams going to go? There's a lot of different places we could try to put them, but the clouds are moving, there's a slight wind blowing through the plants. We're going to have to be very careful where we place our seams. Let's bring in our second piece of footage and see what we can learn from that. Alright, so we've imported our second footage element. We've noticed that the frame range and the format are the same size. That's a good start. Alright, and then it looks like this is static and on a tripod. That's good, because if this was moving, we would have to stabilize it and then match our other's camera movement. But let's just double check here real quick and zoom in and make sure that there's absolutely 0 movement in this plate, because a lot of the time when you're combining plates like these, you'll have a little bit of a jiggle. But it looks like in this case, this is pretty rock solid, so we can just straight up skip the stabilization step. What else are we looking for here? Well, the seams, again, you can see that as the actor is walking through, he's hitting a lot of bushes. That certainly won't match. And even regardless if he wasn't hitting the bushes, the wind is never going to blow them exactly the same. So we'll have to keep that in mind. Another thing we can be looking for is the color the same between the plates? We're outdoors and lighting shifts, cameramen change exposures. So let's take a look real quick and A/B between them. Well, these exposures aren't the same, so we're going to have to make sure they match. It looks like our footage 2 is a little bit more lifted than our footage 1. So now that we have our project set up, let's save our nuke script. We can go over to File, hit Save Comp, and again, we will go to our Elements folder. Let's make a new folder real quick. We'll just hit this new folder button. I'll just call this NK for nuke. So I'm going to call this RBL for Rebelway Week 1 V01. It's always important to have version numbers because you're going to be iterating, and when you change your mind later, you're going to want to be able to go to your backups. And we'll hit Enter for save. So now our nuke script has been saved in this folder. All right, now we have our project set up. We've analyzed our shot. Let's get to the next step and get compositing in the next video. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.